The night air in Ferrara felt heavy, thick with incense and expectation. Candles flickered against golden walls while nobles waited in tense silence. At the center of it all stood Lucrezia Borgia, dressed as a bride yet carrying the weight of an empire's ambition. This was not a wedding of love, it was a negotiation sealed in silk and gold. Her husband, Alfonso d'Este, heir to one of Italy's oldest dynasties, approached her not only as a man, but as a political necessity. Witnesses lingered nearby, their presence a reminder that even intimacy could become spectacle. The marriage had to be proven, the alliance secured beyond doubt. For Lucrezia, this was not romance, it was survival. But this night was only the latest chapter in a life shaped by power. To understand her here, in Ferrara, one must return to Rome, to the rise of her father, Rodrigo Borgia, who became Pope Alexander VI. Italy at the time was not a united nation. It was a battlefield of rival states, mercenaries, and foreign kings. In the center of this fragile chaos stood the papacy, powerful enough to bless or destroy dynasties. Alexander VI did not see the papal throne as sacred duty alone. He saw opportunity. Without ancient royal blood or massive armies, he relied on something else. His children, among them, Cesare Borgia, burned with ambition, brilliant, fearless, and ruthless. He dreamed of carving his own kingdom through strategy and steel. He would become the sword of the family. Lucrezia was different. Educated in languages, music, and diplomacy, she possessed charm that could disarm enemies. If Cesare was the blade, she was the bridge between rival powers. At 13, she learned her first lesson. She was married to Giovanni Sforza, Lord of Pesaro. The ceremony dazzled Rome with wealth and celebration, but beneath the beauty lay calculation. For a few years, she played the role of obedient wife, smiling as alliances were strengthened. Yet in the Borgia world, usefulness determined value, and usefulness could expire. When political winds shifted, her husband became unnecessary. The Pope sought annulment, claiming the marriage had never been consummated. The accusation humiliated Giovanni publicly. In fury, Giovanni retaliated with whispers darker than humiliation. He claimed the Borgia family sought annulment to hide forbidden desires within their own household. The rumor spread quickly through Italy, attaching itself to Lucrezia's name. Whether believed or doubted, it stained her reputation permanently. Returned to Rome at 17, she was no longer an innocent bride. She was a young woman surrounded by scandal, yet still valuable in the great game of power. Soon another marriage was arranged, this time to Alfonso of Aragon, Duke of Bisceglie. Unlike before, something unexpected happened. Affection grew between them. For the first time, Lucrezia experienced warmth not tied to strategy. They shared laughter, and eventually a son was born. In that fragile happiness, she glimpsed another life. But ambition has little patience for love. Cesare's political goals began to conflict with Naples, Alfonso's homeland. What once strengthened the family now threatened it. One evening, Alfonso was attacked and left gravely wounded. Though he survived the first assault, danger lingered. Like a shadow in the corridors of the Vatican, Lucrezia refused to leave his side. She guarded his food, limited visitors, and prayed desperately for his recovery. It was the closest she came to open defiance, yet in the end, ambition prevailed. Men loyal to Cesare entered Alfonso's chamber and ended his life quietly. Love had become liability. Grief transformed her. Whatever innocence remained faded in that moment. She understood that in her world, attachment invited destruction. Set away from public view while outrage cooled, Lucrezia absorbed a brutal lesson. Survival would require adaptation, not resistance. Then came the most delicate proposal yet. Ferrara, proud and cultured, hesitated to join itself to the infamous Borgia name. Gold was offered. Promises were made. Subtle threats hovered in the background. Eventually, Alfonso d'Este agreed to the marriage, and so Lucrezia returned to the altar once more, not as a hopeful girl, but as a woman who understood the cost of alliances. The witnessed consummation in Ferrara was meant to silence doubt. It was proof of fertility, proof of legitimacy, proof that the bargain held. Yet beyond humiliation lay distance. Ferrara stood far from Rome's intrigues and from Cesare's dominating presence. In this new court, watched carefully by skeptical eyes, Lucrezia chose reinvention instead of despair. She embraced refinement, surrounded herself with poets, musicians, and scholars, and slowly reshaped perception through action rather than words. Where many expected intrigue, they found composure. Where they anticipated scandal, they discovered discipline. The woman once whispered about in Roman corridors began to earn cautious respect in Ferrara. And as time passed, something remarkable happened. The shadow of her family grew weaker, while her own presence grew stronger. This was no longer merely a Borgia pride. This was a duchess learning how to survive beyond the reach of those who once controlled her fate. In Ferrara, Lucrezia stepped into a world that valued elegance as much as power. The court was refined, alive with music, poetry, and conversation. At first, every glance toward her carried suspicion, as a scandal might still cling to her shadow. She understood those looks. She had lived beneath judgment for years. But instead of resisting, she responded with patience. She listened more than she spoke, observed before she acted. Gradually, her presence began to shift the atmosphere. She sponsored artists and welcomed thinkers, transforming the court into a center of Renaissance brilliance. Culture became her quiet strategy. When Alfonso X traveled for war or diplomacy, Lucrezia remained behind to oversee matters of state. She reviewed petitions, made decisions, and maintained stability. In his absence, ambassadors who once reported gossip now wrote of her intelligence and composure. The narrative that had followed her from Rome slowly weakened under the weight of new evidence. She bore children who strengthened the S lineage, securing her position within the dynasty. Each birth reinforced her importance, not as a pawn, but as foundation. The distance from Rome proved vital. Without her father's commanding presence and without Cesare's relentless ambition, Lucrezia could breathe differently. Meanwhile, the world she had left behind began to unravel. Pope Alexander VI fell ill and died, likely from fever, though rumors insisted on poison. With his death, the immense protection of the papacy vanished. Alliances collapsed. Enemies advanced. The Borgia dominance fractured almost overnight. Cesare, once feared across Italy, found himself isolated, captured, imprisoned, briefly escaped. He eventually died far from the glory he once imagined. The conqueror, who had terrified princes, faded into history's margins. The empire built on aggression crumbled quickly without its architect. Yet, Lucrezia endured. In Ferrara, she was no longer dependent on Borgia power. She had woven herself into the fabric of another house. Her days were filled with administration, charity, and the rhythms of court life. She supported commons and cared for the poor, cultivating an image of sincere piety. Those who met her described dignity rather than decadence. Letters from her hand revealed thoughtful concern for governance and family. Still, complexity remained. She had grown within a ruthless system. She understood its methods, its calculations, its dangers. It would be naive to imagine she was untouched by political maneuvering. Survival in such a world required awareness and resilience. But awareness does not equal cruelty. Adaptation does not erase victimhood. Her life balanced between complicity and coercion. Years passed, and Ferrara flourished. Art and scholarship thrived under her patronage. Visitors praised the court's refinement. The same woman once branded with dark legend became associated with creativity and stability. Her health, however, began to weaken after repeated pregnancies. Even so, she continued her duties, refusing to withdraw entirely from responsibility. In her final childbirth, complications arose. At 39, her life ended quietly, far from the spectacle that had once defined her youth. The bells of Ferrara rang in genuine mourning. Citizens grieved not a monster, but a duchess who had governed with steadiness. Yet history has a long memory for scandal. The tales of poison and forbidden desire endured in popular imagination. Enemies of the Borgia family had amplified rumors, and those stories proved more dramatic than quiet governance. Modern reflection invites a more measured view. Documentation often contradicts the darkest legends surrounding her name. She was born into ambition she did not design. Used as instrument before she was old enough to choose, she endured humiliation and personal loss. Her father and brother sought domination through force. Both fell dramatically. She sought endurance and found it. Perhaps that is the most revealing contrast. The sword shattered, the so-called pawn survived. She transformed constraint into opportunity, scandal into reinvention, not through rebellion, but through persistence. Was she entirely innocent? Likely not. Few figures of Renaissance politics were free from compromise. But was she the monstrous figure painted by rumor? Evidence suggests something far more human. Lucrezia Borgia became a study in survival within structures designed to limit her. The night in Ferrara that once seemed her ultimate submission became the threshold to autonomy. Beyond that night lay years of gradual self-definition, shaped by intelligence rather than fear. In a world where women were often treated like treaties, she managed to build a sphere of influence rooted in culture and governance. Her legacy challenges simple judgment. Villain and victim are easy labels. Reality is more intricate. She was shaped by power, scarred by it, and ultimately transformed by distance from it. When the architects of her early life vanished, she remained steady and remembered differently by those who truly knew her, and perhaps that endurance, more than any rumor, defines her place in history.